Culture may not continue handshaking as much after this, but I'm looking forward to giving each of you a hug, those of you who want that, of course. And until then, you'll get a lot of air hugs. It's great to see you today, and I'm encouraged by the theme of the day. I can't imagine speaking on anything other than what we have decided is best for the various needs of the congregation here. So thank you for tuning in. Hope it's a blessing for you. Class woke me up. Let's get going. Who are you praying to? Hold that thought. That's the question. Who are you praying to? We have a focus on Christ. This is our annual theme, and it's our mission every day. But we do have a mission statement reworded to complement the Lord's Great Commission to all of us as we equip ourselves so that we can better lead other people to Christ. Now, as it's written on the screen, even though you're at home and I'm here, would you say that with me? Equipping disciples to make new disciples. Amen. We do that all the time. I am personally encouraged by the intense and increased focus of prayer in our society the past week, aren't you? I'm encouraged. Together again is louder than the talk of some others in days past that think, why do I even need to come? We're not taking that for granted, and I'm eager for that to come back. I'm also eager and thankful for the focus on prayer in our society. After you study the Old Testament, it's obvious that while the nature of humanity is to reach up to God during times of desperation, Christians ever rely on God through all times with a humble heart of dedication and devotion. So for the Christian, prayer is a vital spiritual discipline that both proves and purifies our faith, our trust. Prayer is vital for the experience that we are to have from heaven's perspective on earth of the divine peace and purpose, perpetuity, joy, and zeal. And I want all of those things. And yet, Christians, we're human, we become so easily apathetic and lazy in our prayers. And we might begin to feel that just wanting something and asking for it. That's not right. James chapter 4 verse 2 would tell us that one of the reasons we don't have the spiritual blessings that God is eager to give is because we don't ask. Not ask as often or at all like we should. And we do pay for that by the absence of those blessings. It's a dreadful idea to think of being guilty of those sins of apathy and laziness. But another deadly cause of avoiding prayer is a soul void of biblical faith. James then teaches that our primary question today is, how do you view the God of the Bible? How do you view the God of the Bible? That affects your prayers and everything else. Without biblical faith in the biblical God, there is no biblical prayer to experience the biblical blessing. And since among all of us today, all of us together, thinking of each one individually, there may be too many needs to address specifically in one lesson. So our secondary question for today's lesson is, do you have any specific prayer requests for God that you have either not shared with your siblings or are refraining or have ceased from asking God in your personal prayers? For whatever reason, if the answer is yes, that doesn't have to be the case anymore. Today, we are going to again combine unique principles and parables for one message. Today, we're combining a very interesting parable that is, in a way, quite frightful and thankfully fictitious, to encourage us with a reassuring psalm, to equip us and to evoke us to become and to remain victorious, faithful prayer warriors again this week and beyond. Let's deal with that secondary question first, and then we conclude with the marvelous relationship that we can have with God. One of the most powerful teachings that Jesus had on prayer came from a unique parable that some mistakenly consider frightful. But since it's fictitious and we'll see how it's actually quite humorous by contrast. For an improper view of your relationship with God and our relationship with others, let's turn to Luke chapter 18. Luke chapter 18, beginning at verse 2, Jesus said, "In a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared about men. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, 'Grant me justice against my adversary.' For some time he refused. But finally he said to himself, 'Even though I don't fear God or care about men, yet because this woman keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually wear me out with her coming.'" Okay, in this story, there's a main character, the widow. Widowhood is never easy. 2,000 years ago, in the Middle East, it was a far more desperate condition. If a widow had no son or relative, they would essentially have nothing except all day to beg to survive. God has always given stern command to his people to take care of such who are in need, and stern consequence if they do not. In this parable, not only is she in an extremely desolate condition, she's also in a desperate situation because there's an adversary. There is an unnamed villain who is harassing her. We don't know why, doesn't matter. It could have been intimidation. It could have been emotional persecution. It could be that maybe he stole from her or not owing her a debt that she could use the funds for and help her out. Who knows? But in any case, the adversary is winning and she's losing. So like some people see prayer, finally, she does the only thing left that might help. She barges into the room, pleads her case to the local judge, and throwing herself at his not much mercy. Person as not fearing or respecting God, and naturally, as a result, having no care, concern, or respect for other people. Such a person is scary to even be 6 feet from. But why is this a scary scenario or circumstance for any such person to be sitting in a judge's chair without a handle on divine morality and justice? One feels no compulsion to make honorable decisions in light of his or her future judgment from the high judge on that great day. This judge did whatever he wanted to do, caring none about the likes of her. And yet he's this widow's last resort for help. Only possible last resource for help. As if her condition wasn't bad enough, the first time yielded the treatment that she wasn't, I guess, too surprised by. It didn't work too well. So further hurt and further shocked by the treatment of this judge, she gathers her wits, re-examines her situation, and with some grim resolve says to herself things like this: "I know that there's nothing else I can do except annoy him by repeatedly coming before him. I'll pester the daylights out of him until I get what I need, or until he at least hears me. I'll be at his door when he wakes up. I'll follow him around the golf course. I'll watch him while he eats. I will be at his door. I'll keep knocking. I'll follow him until to the grocery store and to back home. Wherever he goes, I will be there. He will either give me what I want, he'll possibly put me in jail, or he might even order to kill me. But there's nothing else she can do." Thankfully, she got the help that she wanted. She pestered this unrighteous judge until one day he just threw up his hands and says, "Okay, give this woman what she wants just to get her off my back. I can't take it anymore." Okay, there's our story. Did you enjoy it? It has a happy ending. I like stories with a happy ending. So why does this story not settle well with us? It's because that judge was no good. The judge was, by God's terms, Psalm 14:1, a fool, an uncaring fool. What was Jesus' primary point in sharing this unusual parable in the first place? Well, context is important. Verse 1. As your eyes look at verse 1 here, Jesus began this story to teach that his disciples are to always pray and never give up. Okay. So why illustrate that truth with a parable like this? Once we understand it, we'll never forget it. This one could stump us, because if we interpret this parable like we do most parables, we might consider to look at things that are similar. How does this compare to this or compare to that? Most parables are allegory. Most parables take components that stand for a truth outside the story, and we're conditioned from birth really to see how a story's circumstance relates to this spiritual truth. We say things like, this is like this, that is like that. And so you and I as Christians might enter some dangerous theological waters if we, by conditioning, ask after this parable ourselves the question, how is God like that unjust judge? Whoa! Don't ask that question. That's the wrong question. Does God despise humanity, preferring to leave them in squalor, impoverished as a condition of powerlessness, caring none about meeting the needs of hurting, preferring only to be left alone? Is that what you say God is like by the implication of that question? Thank God that this parable does not compare him to such a person, but actually contrasts him far from such a person. This is a parable of contrast, illustrating reality by the opposite. If God was like that judge in any way, how would you look at your prayers? Well, you'd probably look at them not like James 5:16, that are powerful, quick, and effective, but instead you look at them as exhausting, laborious, unpleasant, persistent as an effort in hopes of only by incessant pestering maybe getting God's attention for some help as our last resort. And many people see prayer that way. Maybe they say, if we bang on heaven's door long enough, maybe he'll call one of his heavenly hosts to go take care of it just so they'll stop bugging us. That view is dead wrong. I hope that's obvious. So, after Jesus described how this unjust judge reacted, he then, in verses 7 and 8, says these words, "And will God not bring about justice for his chosen ones?" If you wanted to highlight that in a side margin, reference that, emphasize his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night. Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. Oh, I love that, don't you? Therefore, someone would say, I can understand now that God's not like that judge, but how can you say we are not like that widow? This is a parable of contrast. We're not like that widow because in Christ we are not poor, powerless, forgotten, abandoned, despised by the judge. We are God's adopted children by a caring Father who watches over us and knows all about us. Just unfair, uncaring, preoccupied, and all other negative adjectives that could be proper, or at least accurate, but not proper to share at this time, but do describe him. But our God is righteous, holy, tender, responsive, sympathetic. God is everything that judge was not. And he's eager to bless his children because that's his nature. Psalm 34:8. Test or prove the Lord. See that he is good. It's a bonus verse for you, 2 Samuel 12. 2 Samuel 12, we focus on David's sin so often when Nathan called David out in that creative way. But he briefly, in the process of this, God briefly includes a powerful point about himself and the blessings that he's given. Verse 8, I gave your master's house and wives to you. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. If all of that had been too little, I would have given you even more. Even Jesus, as we studied in our class, spoke about the nature of Those who pursue righteousness of good parents, and I'll say in this case, good parents who enjoy the blessing that comes from giving good gifts to their children. It gives God great joy to bestow blessings on his children. And it always has. Leviticus 26:3 says, "Follow me," God says, "and I will give you an abundant harvest." Many principles to the truths of the people then in the Old Testament time and principles of sowing and reaping, but for us spiritually, that still applies. Ephesians 1:5 and Galatians 4:7. God has adopted us as sons, and as a son, we are an heir of all of heaven itself, which is the embrace of fullness of the presence of God in his nature. I am so eager for that. God, as a perfect Father, will give us what we really need, and in Christ he certainly already has, but thankfully he knows that we have needs in this world, and he's not just an all-loving Father, he's an all-knowing Father. Sometimes we ask for things we don't need like we think we do, and thankfully we don't get everything we ask for, but in all of our prayers we trust in him. That's where you can be specific in your prayers, not just faithless and generic, specific and faithful, trusting that he hears and he will answer in the way that's best for all. He's willing, he's able, and we trust him in this. So, don't hold back your petitions. Pick up the ones that you maybe have left by the wayside. Improve and adapt and enhance them as you mature, yes, but God is not like that judge, remember? So don't hold back your petitions. He is our faithful Father, and that's how he answers our prayer, as a faithful, perfect Father would answer his children. He won't give us everything we want, he will give us everything we need, and yet he is eager to bless with special blessings those who ask for him. What are we asking for? Are we asking for the things that God is already eager to give us? Ephesians 3:14, God is able to do far more than what we ever ask or imagine. On your outline's second page, if you've picked it up, it's on the back. If you printed it out, it's the second sheet, perhaps. This is your study or assignment sheet for the week. Take the directory, follow the assignments, and make sure you spend those few minutes a day reading the verses and, inspired by those verses, giving specific petitions before God on behalf of your brethren and even for yourself. And this will work. Don't be generic. It doesn't require much faith on that. Be specific. And I hope it's obvious that we're not just talking about physical blessings, even though you can include those. Absolutely. But what are some blessings, even spiritually, that we can all pray for and instantly, by application, instantly, with the resources we have, receive the blessings, because our God is, by contrast, an omnibenevolent and ever-present God. I'm about to get ahead of myself. Let's read verses 7 through 10 in Psalm 139. Psalm 139, 7 through 10. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, there you are, you're there. If I make my bed in hell or lay with the dead, behold, you're there too. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. Let's think about who our great God is and how that changes our life. Remember, I asked, who are you praying to? That affects everything. Let me tell you about the God that we're praying to. When you're worried, God is your confidence. Isaiah 43:2. And think about all the times that God manifested his care during these exceptional times. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. Remember all those counts? For I am the Lord, your God. When we're worried, God is our companion. So his presence is calming. His presence calms me. Point 2, when you're lonely. There are many different personalities in any congregation. Some are extra burdened by this. Some are lonely during this time. Extra. God is our spirit's companion. His presence cheers us up. When Job went through those tremendous temptations, he knew the truth that he recorded in chapter 13, verse 27. God is keeping a close watch on our paths. Don't forget that. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5 is a good parrot verse for this. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And that's echoed in Psalm 25:16. I don't want to fail to mention this if I haven't already. Go through the Psalms during this time. Read the Psalms, and you will be blessed. Other people have went through far more than we can ever imagine, and that same truth helps us. And then number 3, the God that we serve, when you're tempted spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, socially, physically, God is our counselor. He's there to give us the advice that we need. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. God's presence assists. God's presence helps me not get crushed by my sin. And whatever the struggle, he's already in his foreknowledge and providence made a way available for you to escape or endure. It's beautiful. When you're discouraged, and if that's your extra burden, I've got great news. God is your comforter. The temporary distance rule may apply to us, but it doesn't apply to him. It doesn't apply to God. He's not just dwelling with you or beside you. He is within your very spirit, child of God. God is right there to enter your pain, to suffer with you first and then be blessed. Psalm 34:18, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are contrite or crushed in spirit. So when you're discouraged, feeling defeated and like no one cares, God's presence guides or gets us through, because God is our comforter. And Ron shared this passage last week, I believe, and it's a great one. Isaiah 40, verse 29. God gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But anyone who puts their hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. These are the types of messages I keep focus on through the week, and they help me. And I'm glad to know that these truths can help you too. Our primary question today has been, how do you view God? Because that affects our prayers. We saw what he's not. We see how he is. He is a spiritual anchor. He's a helper in time of need. He is a protector. He's always a provider, and so much more. And I'll conclude by not asking again, but at least addressing by application the secondary question. As a Christian, if you have any request and or need that you have not, number one, shared with the siblings, and even have ceased from or hesitated asking God in your prayers, in your petitions to him before his throne of grace and mercy, then don't hold back anymore. Don't hold back anymore. We have an extra song added after this lesson with the expressed intent purpose to encourage you to keep praying, keep trusting, because prayer is a blessing for his children. And the question is, are you his child by obedience to the gospel? Let us know if you want to invest in eternity by putting him on in baptism. But as a child of God, don't hold back. We pray to a great God. And at this point, I hope that you enjoy this 4-part song. Sing along with it to enjoy the magic of harmony and the blessing of praise, but encouraging you to reach up to the Lord always in prayer, knowing that he's there for you.